everybody. Welcome once again on the road to the ProcureTech Cup. This is episode 21 on the season, and we've got a great show lined up for you today. We want to show you the art of the possible with procurement technology to procurement professionals who I hope are watching. And so we're going to be talking about change management strategies today for intake and orchestration solutions with our friends at BeNeering. And so just before we get into that, though, always a little bit of housekeeping to do, right? So here's where we are in the season. We've got 5 episodes left, so we are closing out the season fairly quickly here. We've got SRM shows lined up for the next 2 weeks around governance models and change management models or strategies to be successful when you're deploying these types of solutions. And then we'll wrap up with Pactum, who's representing the specialized solution category around the same types of topics. And then, of course, at the end of April 22nd to 24th, we've got the ProcureTech Unpacked 100% virtual conference coming up. So 3 half days to essentially give you all the knowledge that of how to be successful with these different types of technology, what the art of the possible is, and also make you a new industry best friend that's also doing digital transformation in their company somewhere else in the world, right? So I've got those two dueling objectives to complete or to satisfy for folks who are attending the conference. There'll be these breakout sessions with peers, vendor solution demos, workshops, and keynotes as well. So we're going to have a lot of fun at the end of April and hope that you can join us. If you're interested in securing a spot, we have the QR code here where you can fill out the survey around, hey, where are you at in your maturity? Where are you at in terms of your digital transformation journey, your knowledge level, so that we can put you with folks where it's going to be, conversations that are relevant to you. And so we're already over halfway sold in terms of the tickets. So if you'd like to get a ticket, you'd like to attend, or you'd like to learn, just learn more, right? We'll reach back out to you if you fill out the survey, and we'll give tickets on a first come, first serve basis to folks who have a good fit for the event, right? We'll make sure that that's the case before selling you a ticket. So that being said, let's get into our content for the show today. What is intake and orchestration? So we'll just level set on that with our guest from BeNeering, and then we'll dive into the conversation around what are the change management strategies that are specific to intake and orchestration platforms that we should be thinking about. And we've got a little 3-point summary here where it's all about, when you're thinking about intake and orchestration, it's the end user journey that's the main aspect of it, right? Your requesters, your stakeholders that are being involved in the procurement process. And so that should be your North Star. We'll look at data architecture as being an OCM tool, and then knowing what should happen in the different scenarios that you're exposing stakeholders to potentially, and then wrap things up by the end of the half hour here. So action-packed show. Let's get going. I'm going to bring in my guest before we start looking at this. So we've got Natalia Parmenova from BeNeering, Chief Revenue Officer. Thanks so much for being here, Natalia.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I always love your no-nonsense insights into the world of ProcureTech. And I know folks who watch appreciate it as well. So thanks for being here. You're well. Everything's going well at BeNeering?
Everything is fine. Spring is starting in Europe. I don't know how about Canada, but we have flowers and sunshine and good weather.
Not yet, but I am looking forward to that. Give it a few more weeks and I'll be right there with you. At least I hope. So, all right, let's dive into it here. What is an intake and orchestration solution as viewed through our market map, which you could grab a copy of via the QR code if you're interested. So to me, this is the lens by which I view the ProcureTech market, and we see intake and orchestration. I've included agents in there as well, right? But in the middle, they're linking all the different sub-processes of procurement, whether it's category management, sourcing, operational procurement, right? Doing your requisitions, purchase orders, approvals, and SRM, right? The whole supplier relationship management journey, the supplier lifecycle, and making sure that when users are coming into the procurement's front door, they're being routed to the right processes as needed and as transparently as possible to execute on your strategy, right? So that's how I think about intake management, which is that first piece of bringing the users in, and then process orchestration, which is ensuring that all the stakeholders and systems and processes are carried out as we would like them to be carried out as efficiently as possible. Would you contrast that definition, Natalia, in any way?
No, maybe just to complement. For me, the big difference between all other categories of procurement solutions and intake management is that in intake, for the most part, we are dealing with the simple people, with the requesters, with people who are not procurement professionals. And that's why I think the whole topic of change management or making sure that these innocent requesters are actually accepting the intake management that you are implementing is especially pertinent comparing to all other areas.
Yeah, and I won't ask any follow-up questions now because I know we'll touch on that topic a bit later here. But I completely agree. And just before we get into the conversation, would you tell us a little bit more about BeNeering, what you guys do, and I know why you're qualified to come have the conversation with us, but I'd love for people to learn more a little bit.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. What we do, well, essentially, we are covering this complex world of operational or indirect procurement that we usually picture for our customers, like on this slide. So, what is the complexity of operational procurement, or what you call intake? Essentially, when we speak about requesters, there is a huge variety of internal customers that is taking part in this process, from very structured engineers to less structured R&D people to maybe completely non-structured marketing guys. So intake solutions have to cover the peculiarities of all these internal customers. And this multitude of internal customers obviously have a high diversity of requirements, from simple things like pens and papers to microscopes to complex machinery to alpacas or any other special scenes. And it's obvious that to satisfy this variety of requirements, procurement has to be able to operate through different buying channels and make sure that people somehow find themselves in all these buying channels, because otherwise the world is called a free text request, right? And in addition, obviously, we all would like that the traffic rules have been cancelled and purchasing policies together with traffic rules. But unfortunately, this is not how the world is managed. So the world of indirect procurement also is governed by all kinds of purchasing policies, procedures. Partially they are coming from purchasing, but for the most part from finance. And this also needs to be covered somehow. And on top of everything, there is this elephant in the room called ERP. I mean, for the most part, in our world, I would say it's SAP here over in Europe. Normally, companies take this as a single point of truth, and there is a lot of automation hidden in this solution or in this universe. And basically, what BeNeering is doing, first of all, we are recognizing the complexity of this universe, all these aspects that need to be taken into account into one intake solution. And how we address it, maybe we can move to the next slide. Yes, so basically, our guided buying solution or guided intake, however you call it, is embracing all of those challenges with one standard platform. So the users are easily navigated through one search field, and they're being sent to different buying channels, to AI intake, to chatbots, depending on what they want. And the idea is that during this intake process, they do as much as possible themselves, not just throwing things over the fence to procurement to sort it out, but that the solution embraces usability, but at the same time, automatism in suggesting data to requesters, at the same time, automatism in doing compliance checks, so that in exceptional cases when procurement gets to do something, everything that could have been done by automation and AI is already done.
Mm. And I think that you use an interesting analogy to kind of illustrate what that ends up looking like, right?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a fair analogy, because I'm sure that in the same way, when airports were implementing self-services for check-in, they were afraid that people would not do it because they like to be served. They like that somebody at the counter does it for them. However, I think they did a very, very good job in designing and planning these machines in a way that is super simple. Since I travel a fair bit, I like this analogy because, yes, on one side, I'm doing everything myself, from printing my boarding pass to basically putting my luggage in a machine, but it's by far faster than standing in any line. It's very intuitive. I'm not meeting with any special moods of counter people at 4 o'clock in the morning or anything of the sort. And I measured myself in Frankfurt airport. I go through in like 1.5 minutes, like if I'm super slow. So in
Yeah.
the same way, essentially, what we are doing, we are providing a very intuitive self-service tool. But at the same time, people are not annoyed by doing it themselves because it's fast, it's intuitive, and it's efficient.
And procurement never goes away, right? So if there is that exception scenario, you could still go to the counter, if I use the analogy, right?
Yeah, this for sure. But at the same time, we are giving procurement a fair chance not to do endless compliance and endless checks, and focus on stakeholder management, on supplier management, because the automation within the system is so high that they don't need to do checks and rechecks.
Yeah.
And one important point, the purple point, uh, we have a very, very superior architecture as far as ERP is concerned, so that we are delivering our solutions with a very efficient, optimal TCO, which I think is an important topic also.
Beautiful. And one which we'll have to take up later on, because I see the time flying here, and I wanted to get us into the discussion around change management. And it's funny because we had a user on LinkedIn who's watching the show ask, why do most of the change gurus believe that most of the change initiatives fail? And I think as we lead into this, I would just preface it with, like, it's not an opinion, it's what the data tells us, right? I think yesterday on another event I was talking about how there's a meta study done of like 120 different change digital transformation projects, and like they came up with 20 different reasons why these projects end up failing if they fail, and 14 of them were change management related, right, or governance structure or messaging, etc. And so it's just that it's such an important point, but we often get it wrong because it's the most complicated to get right. The software is the easy part in some shapes, in some projects, right? And so I'd love to, yeah, as we get into this topic here, like, what's your perspective on how people need to be thinking about change management to be successful with their initiatives in the intake and orchestration space?
I mean, there are 5 million ways to explain change management and to justify change management. For a change, I decided to use a little bit a less conventional approach. At the end of the day, any project is targeting to achieve next level in costs and efficiency. Nobody is doing projects for spending more or just satisfying the users or pleasing I don't know whom. So essentially, it's about efficiency and costs, right? But what we see is relatively tricky in intake or indirect procurement projects, is that you have to pull these four strings, like that are described in these rounds, together. So yes, you want to use more and more structured channels and reduce indirect spend. Yes, you want to automate and minimize potentially or purpose procurement FTEs. Yes, for sure, you want to do all this at decent money, so optimal TCO. But at the same time, you should not overload requesters with the work, right? And I think in case of intake, change management is basically very much related to TCO. Because if you don't do change management, one of the streams definitely is going to get out of control.
Yeah.
How about this, like for a change as an explanation? Not
Yeah.
saying like we want to embrace everything and hug everybody. I mean, it's purely about money at the end of the
Yeah.
day, right?
Well, yeah, time and money, and then being able to do more with it, like be more productive for sure, and but also figuring out the why for each of those stakeholder groups, right? Like for procurement, it might be doing more with less, or doing more with the same amount of resources. Requesters, it's saving time, but ultimately, yeah, it translates to what you're saying for sure. But I think once you've got that why, then and I love what we've come up here with the solution is like there's the why, and then there's all the classic change management. I'll say tips and tricks or tactics, or the training and the communication structures, etc. But we went in a different direction this time as well, right? In terms of thinking about if you know the why, and if you have a very specific pathway to that, then it's looking at, okay, well, how does that influence design so that you minimize the amount of change management that's needed, because the solution essentially caters to how people already work, right? Is that a fair assessment?
Pretty much, yes. I mean, maybe here I'm looking now at this slide and thinking that it's a bit overcomplicated what we are trying to say here, or mostly for reading. I mean, I think there are always two sides to the project, especially when non-professional users are concerned. There is a process design which becomes automated or is automated within a tool, and then there are these people who are supposed to use this tool. Going back to the analogy of the airport, one thing is to design a cool machine, another thing to make sure that people are doing what is they're supposed to do with this machine. And I think the main question that project teams should answer to the user or to the requester is how his or her life will be better with the new tool, right? Because obviously we project people are completely convinced that their life will be better. But I think there is some thinking to be done every time when the project teams are talking to users, right? And let's say the simple tips here, which I find very very important, is first of all, potentially project team should live a little bit of the life of this user, right? So of the marketing person, of the engineering person, of R&D person, to understand where actually procurement comes into their life. What is the portion of their lives that they are spending requisitioning something or looking for something? How do they do it? Do they do it morning, middle of the night, at lunchtime? Again, and the more we understand about the life of our future users, the better we can answer the question how their life will be better, right? So and then different reasons can come out. Maybe it's time savings, right? So do things faster. Maybe it's on opposite, receiving something faster. Maybe it's transparency of the status. Maybe they don't want to talk to anybody, so it's independence from procurement. So I think depending on even user group, this can and should be analyzed, and then there is obviously higher potential for success.
Yeah.
Sorry, Joel, I'm talking too much.
No, I was going to say, to illustrate, because I was on an intake management project recently where, the project team was trying to sell it, to your point, to the requesters, like, oh, it'll be faster than what you've been used to in the past. But in the past, they were just sending an email to procurement, right? Like just to your point earlier,
Exactly.
dumping it over the wall, right? Like you deal with this, right? And so it was very fast and efficient for
It's
them
very
already,
fast.
right? And so they had to change the value proposition in how they were selling the project from a change management standpoint to say, no, okay, actually you'll receive stuff faster, right? And you'll know what the actual steps, visibility into the steps and where it's at, and so you have to change the value proposition based on that user group. But to your point, for other user groups, it might be completely different. And so stepping into those shoes and making sure that you understand the what the value prop is for those different user groups, and it might be all the way down to the individual level, is what change management is all about in my mind, and what will lead to great design, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it leads us to the first point that we wanted to discuss, right, around focusing on the end user journey. And I'd love to, get your perspective. Like I think you hinted at it at the beginning of the show, right, around designing for the eternal beginner, or the person that's always starting over, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's really important to step into the shoes of the end users, and despite the fact that we think that potentially some super fancy tool is better just because it's fancy, it's not necessarily the case. So what we observe, for example, with our customers who started using our intake in the chatbot format, that after a few months, some of the users, especially more structured, more, let's put it this way, engineering oriented, they want to go back to the forms, right? So I mean, the forms technology BeNeering has for many years. We have a very interesting technology because it's not static forms but dynamic forms. So depending on what the user is answering, the next field can change, but still it's observable by people because you stay on one screen. Some of the user communities complain that when they start using chatbots, they don't know how many more questions this beautiful thing is going to ask, right? And people become a little bit unsure. Oh, let's put it this way, there is low visibility how long this beautiful dialogue can last.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that one of the lessons is not to always run after the latest technology. Potentially, good old things can be also efficient.
Yeah, and I put, like, there's meeting people where they work. There's been an axiom that people have been pushing towards, like, hey, let's take these LLMs and bring them into Microsoft Teams or email, right, so that you can interact with it as you're interacting with a person. But to your point, right, there's engineers or there's people that don't want, like, they've never interacted with a person. They've always preferred a form, right? And so to me, it's such an interesting insight that some of your clients have been asking to have a portion of their users go back to web forms. To me, it's like meeting people where they work, not just from a tool standpoint, but also from a preference standpoint, and being able to support multi-channel intake in parallel, and to say, if I have an LLM conversation, like, I also have the form option. I also have other options, legacy options, depending on the user's preference, and they can kind of pick and choose, and get to the same result through that intake experience, right? So I thought when we were prepping the show and you said that, I'm like, oh, that's a super interesting insight in terms of like where intake management can keep maturing from that point of view.
Maybe another example, if we have time, that we put a lot of focus on making the user journey as standard as possible. What I'm trying to say is that whatever people are looking for, paper, something like microscope or tools or services, what they see on the screen should be as much as possible universal. And that's why I think our customers like our solution, because it's very let's say once they understand one screen, it's always the same, right? So there's no such a big variability that you need something and it looks like this, you need something else, it looks like that, and then the users start getting a bit lost, especially when we talk about occasional users. So like sometimes IT teams are a bit too over fencing things instead for people. Like there is this story that parents give children every day different fruits, while if you ask a doctor, it's just good every day an apple.
Yeah, that's right. And the thread I'd pull on, and it brings us to the second point, is like, to me, there's catalog data as a perfect example of that, right? If you're just gonna use an intake solution to send people to 100 different punch outs, like you're gonna give them a different user experience every time they're going to a different punch out, right? And so it's about delivering relevant data to requesters in that user journey that's as standardized as possible, or easy to use as possible. And so it's like flipping around and saying, okay, no, we're not going to push users to catalog data. We're actually going to bring catalog data to users, right? And that's a little shift, which illustrates the second point you wanted to make around data architecture, and delivering data to users in context is another way that you facilitate change management, because you're making it easy for them to go like, oh, you anticipate their next step and the data that they need in that next step, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think what is important in intake projects is that procurement has to realize that there is a fair bit of work that they need to do if they want to achieve all these objectives that we were outlining in the beginning. Namely, catalogs need to be negotiated, contracts need to be negotiated, decisions about through which buying channel people can buy what need to be defined. If you want to use marketplaces, you need to have agreements with whatever Amazon or any other marketplace. You need also to define below which threshold people can order just with one management approval or whatever, right? So the more you define, the easier it will be for people, and the less procurement would need to interfere in all this.
Yeah.
Just maybe here linguistically, I'm still struggling a little bit with the term intake. Sorry for this. I much prefer guided buying,
Yeah.
because for me there is more independence of the user and requester in the words guided buying. Intake still sounds a little bit like throwing something over the fence. So we are completely into making requesters as independent as possible without putting more work on them. So that's kind of the essence of the story.
Yeah. And I think we touched on that in the first show together, right? Around like, doesn't matter how you call it, right? Guided
Yeah.
buying, intake management, etc. Like, it's the concept has been around for a long time. The tech is just evolving to integrate new concepts and new capabilities into serving that end user. Like, we put an example here, right? Where, like, all depending on the decisions that you take from a policy perspective, like, can a user just upload a quote, right? And then what happens if that, what data do we need to bring to them? Do we say, hey, have you looked at these other preferred suppliers? And so if yes, you need to have tagged what preferred suppliers are by category, right? And so it's thinking about it in that way of like, what's that user journey and what data needs to be surfaced at the different steps of that user journey. There's an example here. This is may not be applicable to your organization, but at least it helps illustrate that concept of data architecture as a change management tool, because they'll be delighted to go down the Plinko machine, as I always say, if they have the right data at the right time, depending on your rules and your context. And you touched on this, the homework that needs to be done, which I think is this third point that we wanted to touch on around what are your predefined sourcing and purchasing channels, right? You want to know what should happen in every scenario when a user comes in, based on everything that they could potentially buy within your business. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, or add any other examples on why this is a great change management mechanism, right? Of doing that homework.
Well, it's a great change management mechanism, because when you predefine channels, and you predefine content for the users, then they don't need to think much, right? I mean, within BeNeering, we have, I already mentioned it, so-called universal search mechanism, when the users are just typing whatever they need in a natural language, with mistakes in any of the 30 languages, and then they stumble upon what they are supposed to find, right? But there is a work behind, not only in terms of defining the buying channels, but, for example, aligning terminology, aligning your units of measure, aligning the solution with your specific words that are used only within your industry, or even, God forbid, within your company. So the more you define all this, the more people will be easily doing everything without you. And of course, in a modern world, we are using quite a bit of AI in different scenarios, but still, and maybe here I would be contradicting the marketing pitch that is going on in the world. AI cannot define anything for you except for what it can read from somewhere. It doesn't matter, from your data lake, from your ERP system. There are quite a bit already examples on the market when thinking that AI can order based on your historical data, people are getting stocks for what they didn't need, I don't know, for years already, because some data was missing in the data lake. So it's relatively tricky still, even if there is a lot of automation and a lot of good examples for usage of AI, still human role is superior, right, in this.
Yeah. Yeah, and the business analyst role, right, of like thinking through what that should look like what are our strategies and how do they all work together in sync, right? And also having, I love that last point around, if you don't have all the homework done, that's okay too. You can start with catch-all processes, but you should expect that there's going to be a lot more manual work than the things that you have predefined, right? And just to give an example here, like we use two categories. So first one being cleaning supplies. Like you may have a main channel and purchasing channel and sourcing channel where it's a marketplace. You want people to buy through catalog items, and it should cover 90% of routine needs, and people can buy them in a spot buy fashion, right? But you're always going to need a fallback where I can't find what I need in the catalog, and so I should be able to do, use a preferred supplier and send a free text item with description, part number, or a URL from a website. And our goal is to eliminate that, but we still need to support that second scenario, that second channel, right? Whereas it might be different in another category like MRO, where we're using MRP, we have inventory, we have material masters. We want to go get RFQs every time because the prices are always wildly changing in that market. And so that's our main sourcing and purchasing channel for spare parts. But these need to be planned, right? They have materials, they're in bill of materials for equipment, etc. And there's always going to be a long tail of stuff that is unplanned, we don't have materials for, we want to buy in a spot buy fashion because it's a shutdown we do every 10 years, right? And so we might want to support that with catalog items. But we might also, like cleaning supplies, not find them in the catalog, and so need a free text option as well, right? And so to your the guided term that you used before, it's guiding them through, like, okay, which option can we get you through with our preference, and then having fallback options for you if you can't fit into that preference, but also moving all the volume up to the things that are most automated and optimized, or optimated if you want to put both words together, right? So does that jive with how you see it as well, Natalia? I know I went through the
Yes,
example here, but
pretty much. Nothing to add.
beautiful. And so I know it's an abrupt end to it, but Natalia and I can always go long. I think we could probably speak for hours about this stuff. So if you're tuning into the show, I hope that's given you a couple tips on how design, right, of processes and solutions can be a great way to, especially in this intake and requester / stakeholder management area of procurement, like how the design is your best tool for change management, like good design of your solution. One other point that we didn't touch on, but I love to make is like, as you're guiding users, like you could probably guide them towards inventory instead of purchasing externally as well, right? If you have that data available. So I mean, the possibilities are quite interesting. So as we sign off here, as always, I have the pre-procurement newsletter that comes out every Sunday. We have the invitations for the show. We have thought leadership pieces. We share jobs. We share must-read links from news happening in the industry. So we'd love to have you as a reader if you're not already one. And I know, Natalia, you guys also prepared a little asset for folks that may want to learn more about this topic. Can you educate us?
We loaded a couple of the video recordings of our solution that are actually illustrating the points that we were discussing. So, but if you are interested in learning more, just pin me on LinkedIn or.
Sounds good. Yeah, I know you kick around on LinkedIn. I do too. So thank you very much, Natalia, for coming on the show. I know it's always late in Europe when you tune in, so I very much appreciate that. And for everybody who's watching live, thanks so much for being here. You can also tune into the replay on our YouTube channel, and otherwise we'll see you again next week. And for I think the last 4 shows, right? For we're coming up to the end of the season. So a big thank you, Natalia, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Take care. Bye, Joel.
Bye.